We're gonna be
Judges
fine.
ready? Opponents ready?
Yep.
Partner ready?
Yeah, no. Give me 1 second, sorry. Yes.
4 minutes. Time starts now. What if diplomacy was used rather than military power? Well, the world would be a very different place. Donald Trump probably wouldn't be the president of the United States. And even if he was, him and Kim Jong-un wouldn't need to resort to insults like dotard and rocket man to hide the fact that neither of them know what they're doing. Overall, the world would be a better place with less threat to the safety of the human beings. This is why my partner and I affirm the following resolution: on balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power. The goal of the PRO is to have all issues resolved and framework of future issues are resolved as well, which can only be achieved with the optimal use of diplomacy to preserve positive peace and prevent extensive casualties. The burden of the con is to prove that they can create positive peace and save lives with military power. Positive versus negative peace. There's a significant distinction between peace, positive peace, and negative peace, which we will first define and emphasize throughout this debate. Positive peace is the idea that a peaceful situation can be created without the use of any type of power to maintain it, and includes justice. It is the integration of human society. Negative peace is the situation when issues are not resolved but are stopped. Instead of maintaining positive peace, military power more likely hurts the situation it is meant to help. Therefore, Judge, although the opposition may achieve negative peace, they do not achieve the resolution of maintaining peace. If the opponent cannot prove that their resolution achieves positive and therefore real peace, they cannot win the debate. Contention 1. Diplomacy outweighs military power. Subpoint A. Preventative diplomacy. As per a UN official speaking for the UN organization, most of the time, the root causes of most conflicts that may or have already turned violent were political problems requiring political solutions. Secondly, distrust among rival parties in national conflicts ran so high that they were unable to arrive at compromises without diplomatic encouragement. He also says, ideally, we want to prevent violence from erupting in the first place. But even if that fails, robust diplomacy is still required to end the fighting through negotiations and then to help countries navigate the difficult politics of reconciliation and rebuilding. Too many nations fail in this last stage and slide right back into conflict, which is why diplomacy is necessary. If this does not happen, the root cause will get intensified and eventually reoccur. So the negative is not causing peace, but pushing for more war. Subpoint B, collateral damage. Diplomacy also better maintains peace by preventing the risk of uncontrolled casualties caused by the use of military power. The most important casualties caused by military power that diplomacy prevents is all the lives that are lost due to armed conflicts, as well as collateral damage. An example of this is how the U.S. has been bombing Syria in order to reduce ISIS. The bombing has, in fact, caused 60% of innocent deaths in Syria, and Air Wars, a UK-based watchdog group, estimates the civilian death toll from coalition airstrikes at over 3,800. A strike on March 17th, where the U.S. bombed a building in Mosul aimed at killing 2 ISIS snipers, caused a building to collapse, killing 105 innocent civilians. These ineffective military incidents not only increased violence and death, but also increased recruitment for terrorists. The innocent lives we kill by chasing terrorists create more terrorists who have a bad image of America. In the final analysis, what really matters in this debate is creating positive peace with the use of preventative diplomacy and preventing all of the collateral damage caused by military power. On the PRO, we stand on the side of both the world leaders looking to resolve conflict and in the most efficient way possible and the people affected by the decisions leaders make. Armed conflict is a major source of many lives lost, which diplomacy prevents by approaching an issue in a peaceful way, rather than harmfully affecting not only the opposing side of the conflict, but the country, the people of the country, and those who are actually at a loss, even though they did not participate in the conflict itself. Since military power creates negative peace, pushes war, and causes many deaths which could have been prevented, we and you should as well affirm resolved. On balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power. We strongly urge a pro ballot. Thank you.
We'll be taking some prep starting time now.
I think we're ready.
That's 23. So starting time now. When you were talking about the difference between positive and negative peace, why do you think that positive peace completely outweighs negative peace? Could you rephrase that?
So, in our introduction, we stated that positive peace is how, when peace is maintained, it actually resolves the root cause of the problem. Negative peace is just when it stops, when power is used to lessen the issue for an uncertain amount of time with no results, knowing how, if the conflict is going to escalate again.
And could you restate the source of that definition, please?
Would you like a
Just an author.
Joseph
Joseph who?
Joseph S. The guy who wrote the paper on soft and hard power. If you would like an actual link, I can provide that to you.
Okay, and then you were talking about how military power actually hurts the civilians in a certain country. What about economic sanctions? Doesn't
Economic
that also have an
sanctions.
effect on the people of that country rather
Yes,
than
I believe
the leaders?
economic sanctions are a form of hard power.
But they're not military power.
Right, we stated that hard power in the, I said hard power somewhere in there, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then you were talking about all the collateral damages of that were caused by military power. Could you give us some examples of how diplomatic relations would have worked in that sort of situation?
So do you want a do you want a specific example where diplomacy has worked, or do you want a hypothetical situation?
An example where military has failed and diplomacy worked.
So just to clarify, you want a hypothetical situation?
No,
that
a
actually-
real life situation that's happened.
Where diplomacy has worked, where military power has not.
Yes. In order to just back up that claim.
Do you want a card that I can give you, or do you want me to
just an
read
example. Do you have like anything from the Middle East or anywhere in the world? Just an example where military power failed and diplomacy worked to solve the conflict.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe that either me or my partner will bring it up in a future case. I just forgot this.
Alright, is my partner ready?
Yeah.
Are my opponents ready?
Yep.
And are my judges ready? Alright, then I think we're suited to begin. Let's start now. Judge, imagine this situation where you and your friend have a huge disagreement. You try and make amends by asking your friend to come and have a discussion with you. Your friend agrees, however, he or she knows fully well that he or she will not listen and will instead choose to put you through as much trouble as he or she possibly can. Can you do anything about it? No, because through diplomacy you have to rely on the person that you are talking to. After the talk, when your petty disagreement remains unsolved, the consequences will be much graver. So this is why today my partner and I negate the resolution resolved. On balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power. Now, judges, the framework for this debate will be like this. Which side proves more efficient and which side keeps any type of peace? Now, on to our first contention, that military power is efficient whereas diplomacy is inefficient. First of all, diplomacy does not work a majority of the time. According to Robert Art, professor of international relations at Brandeis University, diplomacy has a 32% success rate. Now, our opponents may tell you that this is irrelevant because we are only talking about one country. However, the United States is one of the biggest powers in the world and has been involved in quite a lot of conflicts. The fact that one of the most prominent and affluent countries in the world has a diplomatic success rate of about 32% is quite shocking and says a lot about the current international atmosphere. Secondly, diplomacy depends too much on the other country. Consider this. What do you do when you're trying to solve a problem with a terrorist group or a country governed by a tyrant? Whether this is messianic terrorism, weapons proliferation, failed states, managing regional conflicts, or whatever other international problem one may care to name, the conclusion is always the same. Military power gets the job done. This can also be traced by the example used in our introduction. If your friend is not willing to create peace, you cannot get him to compromise, so tensions are higher. Now, another example of military power being more efficient. MAD, which is mutually assured destruction. A prime example of mutually assured destruction is the Cold War, when two groups quarreled against each other but did not do anything because both groups had weapons that could destroy each other. Moving on to our second contention, that when diplomacy fails, the military consequences are much higher. If we look back into history, judges, we can see that when diplomacy fails, military consequences are much higher than the consequences of an outright war from the get-go. Now, let me talk to you about the Treaty of Versailles, which is the end of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles was a treaty against Germany. Now, two leaders who signed this treaty were Woodrow Wilson and George Clemenceau. Now, Woodrow Wilson wanted a treaty based on his 14-point plan, which he believed would bring peace to Europe. Now, Clemenceau wanted revenge. He wanted to make sure Germany never started a war again. Now, everybody knew at that time that the British public agreed with Clemenceau. But obviously, the Prime Minister wanted a compromise between the two because he knew that revenge was not the best answer. So now, this was the effects of the Treaty of Versailles against Germany. First, war guilt clause. Germany had to take the blame for starting World War I. Secondly, reparations. Germany had to pay £6.6 billion for causing the damage of the war. Third, disarmament. Germany was only allowed to have a small army and 6 naval ships. And finally, territorial clauses, that land was taken away from Germany and given to other countries. Now, obviously, the German people were very unhappy about the treaty, and they thought it was too harsh. Germany could not afford to pay the money, and during the 1920s, the people of Germany were very poor. There were not many jobs, and the price of food and basic goods were very high. Now, people were dissatisfied with the government and voted power to a man who would rip up the Treaty of Versailles. The name of this man was Adolf Hitler. Basically, the diplomatic effort to prevent another world war caused one. Now, Judge, military power is much more efficient and causes less harm when used immediately. For all these reasons, judges, I urge a calm ballot. Thank you. I now stand for cross-examination.
So, everyone ready for cross-examination? Time starts now. When you say in your framework that it doesn't matter what type of peace you're creating, but rather any sort of peace will work for this debate, would you agree, though, that positive peace is the preferred form of peace?
Just to answer that question, the resolution states on balance peace.
I know, but that was not my question. Would you agree or disagree that positive peace is the better type of peace?
I would disagree.
Okay. When you talk about mutually assured destruction in your first contention,
yes.
Could you elaborate a bit more on what you mean?
What mutual destruction is?
No, just elaborate a bit more on your case and the evidence you have against it.
All right, so the best example of this is the Cold War, because where the United States and countries such as Russia both threatened each other but didn't do anything. That is a perfect example of mutually assured destruction, where...
Right, so how did the conflict de-escalate?
I'll get that evidence to you later.
Okay.
I don't have it on me right now.
And you also say that the Versailles Treaty was bad diplomacy, or
Failed
something
diplomacy.
along failed diplomacy, right?
Correct.
But when Germany did the issue not come when Germany chose to rely on military power and chose to militarize instead of going back and using
Which were the
diplomatic-
effects of the failed diplomatic reasons.
Why
So
was it failed though? Was it failed because Germany got the
The main root of the cause was failed diplomacy.
right? But why did the diplomacy fail? Like how? And don't state
Because
the evidence where Germany got
the
all these bad
negotiations
things.
are too harsh. That's where diplomacy went too far.
Okay, and you also say in your first contention that you want to, in your framework, that you want to argue which side proves to be more efficient. I'm sorry, I'm just clarifying.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
We'll be taking.
No. Oh, I thought we were
we're
pressed.
taking some starting now.
We're ready.
Partner ready?
Yes.
Opponents ready?
Yeah.
Judges?
Okay, so starting time now. If we start by looking at my opponent's framework and their introduction to this case and all of the different definitions they provided, we can see that this is already getting way too specific. Starting by the resolution clearly states that we have to be able to prove that military power, which is just military power, not any type of hard power as they interpreted it, we're sticking to military power, can carry out peace. Now, this is up for grabs and up for interpretation, but if we can prove that it's any type of peace, then technically we're still sticking to the resolution, and therefore our framework still stands under theirs. Now, moving on to their main points in their cases, they were talking about how diplomacy is always the best option and how military power fails. But during process, when asked for an example, they weren't able to provide one. And as we further showed, when diplomacy fails, it actually leads to even bigger problems. So in the Persian War, 148 American soldiers were killed and 457 wounded. Now this may seem like a lot, but look at it in relative numbers to the enemy that they were trying to exterminate. The other Allied nations suffered about 100 deaths combined during Operation Desert Storm. There are no official figures for the number of Iraqi casualties, however, but it is believed that at least 25,000 soldiers were killed and more than 75,000 were wounded, making it one of the most one-sided military conflicts in history. It is estimated that 100,000 Iraqi civilians died from wounds or lack of adequate water, food, and medical supplies, directly attributable to the Persian Gulf War. In the ensuing years, more than 1 million Iraqi civilians have died as a result of subsequent UN sanctions. So Iraqi-Kuwait diplomacy did not work, forcing the UN to use military force, which then worked. However, diplomacy and sanctions made things even worse as time went on, which A, proves one of our contentions, and disproves their point that when military power works, diplomacy is the better way to go. Because it's actually the other way around. When diplomacy fails, the actual military consequences of that are much worse than they were before, as we can see in this with a bunch of bloodshed. Moving on to their collateral damage argument, when they were talking about how we need to be able to negotiate with non-state actors or extremist groups or tyrannies, well, that's not exactly right, because if they're not listening to you, as we said in our example with the analogy of a friend who's not willing to talk things out, what are you going to do? Now, you can have targeted military strikes, which will actually help solve the problem as quickly as possible, like cutting off a snake at its head, or you can just keep trying to negotiate with these unreasonable people. And this happened in World War II, for example, in Hitler's supposed diplomacy with Britain. So, in September 30th, 1938 was a momentous day in the life of Neville Chamberlain. As he stepped onto the tarmac of Houston Airport, he could barely contain his excitement because he thought that he struck up a diplomatic deal with Hitler. But little did he know, during the conference in Munich, the power of rhetoric had prevailed and clenched the fist of war had thwarted, or so it seemed. Less than a year later, Hitler flouted the non-aggression pact, fired up the engines of his military, and ignited World War II by rumbling eastward towards Poland. And as we have proven, diplomacy can fail more often than not. With our statistics and our evidence, and they have not proven any of those. And for all these reasons, we urge a con ballot. Thank you.
Can I take 20 seconds of prep, please? The time will start now. Judge ready? Opposition ready? Partner ready? Okay, my time will begin now. Alright, so in your first point against our case, you say that positive peace is too specific to the resolution. I'm just going to restate the resolution for you to clarify. So the resolution was, on balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power. Am I correct? Yes. So, the resolution advocates for better maintaining peace, correct?
Yes, maintaining it.
Maintaining peace. So which one do you think would be the better way to go to maintain peace? Positive peace or negative peace? Which one would be more long-lasting?
If you let me
do you
answer,
think?
I'll tell you.
Sure.
Now, if we're going to go by your definition, which I haven't seen any evidence for that yet. We could give also another definition that could be, it depends on where you go with that, but as long as we maintain peace, we're still proving the resolution, and we stand by our framework.
So how are you maintaining peace with negative peace?
Well, as my partner just told you in his cross-ex and in his opening speech, it's pretty simple. The thing that kept nuclear war from happening after World War II, that's still keeping nuclear war from happening now, is mutually assured destruction, which is how you can still keep the peace and keep maintaining peace for a long time.
Thank you. So you also mentioned an example of the Persian War and talked about Iraqi casualties and how sanctions were bad. Can you explain that a little bit more?
What happened was
And how it's relevant?
The Persian Gulf War, the UN tried to intervene diplomatically by imposing sanctions and trying to talk things out, but in the end that caused an incredible loss of Iraqi civilians' lives and
Thank you.
Iraqi soldiers. If you will let me finish, you'll understand my point. And
No, I
also,
understand.
it
I
was
just
the
wanted
UN.
to ask another question about
Okay.
it. Yes. Do you have any more examples? Yes. Can I have 30 seconds of prep? Time will start now. What do I say about Judges ready? Opposition ready?
Yep.
And partner ready? All right, my time will begin now. So first I'll attack their case, and then I will reiterate points in our case. The first thing, in their opposition's first contention, they claim that soft power is less efficient at maintaining peace because it relies too much on other countries. We have three responses. First, turn that argument against them. Soft power is actually more effective at maintaining peace because if it means that other countries comply with the country's regulations, there is a mutual agreement and strengthening of relations with that country, creating positive peace. Moreover, even if soft power relies too much on other countries, it is still better at maintaining positive peace than military power, which can destroy a country and relations with negative peace, if any peace at all, and push war as a result, exacerbating impacts. Finally, although we have already proved their contention invalid, the debate is not about which type of power is more effective. It is about which type of power better maintains peace. And the opposition has not yet proved how they maintain positive peace with military power better than diplomacy. They also talk about which side proves more efficient as one of the things they value in this debate. As we previously mentioned, efficiency does not matter. It matters how well we maintain peace. Efficiency can play a factor in that, but we should value how well we maintain peace, especially positive peace. And in their second contention, they talk about mutually assured destruction. And we have three responses to this as well. First, mutually assured destruction is not a sustainable solution, which is long-lasting due to escalation, non-state actors like terrorists and radicals, and the fact that the world has actually been making efforts to reduce the stockpiling of weapons from a peak of around 70,000 in 1986 to about 1300 today, only 4,200 of which are operationally active nuclear warheads, as per the Scientific American. Moreover, there is no guarantee that even if mutually assured destruction is true, it will create peace. In fact, turn that argument against them. It will do the exact opposite by building tensions between countries and creating negative peace, eventually pushing war. Finally, in order to best create peace, soft power is necessary, as the use of preventative diplomacy creates positive peace, making a better future and world for future generations. They also talk about how soft power fails, and it has even worse effects than if military power fails. We have 3 responses to this as well. First of all, turn that argument against them. Even if you're not accounting for initial casualties, over the long time, military power builds up tension and creates negative peace, pushing even more conflict, which creates even more casualties than the primary casualties. Moreover, soft power in the long term is unlikely to fail in the first place because of preventative diplomacy creating positive peace in our world. Finally, they talk about the Marshall Plan, and for these reasons, we strongly urge a pro ballot. Thank you.
We'll take some prep starting.
Wait, honestly, these are all con reputations.
Can you get to the tree?
Wait, that's enough.
Is my partner ready? And is my opponent ready?
Yep.
And are my judges ready? Alright, then I think we are ready to begin now. So, why, are you guys ready?
Yes, we are.
Then,
Sorry.
could we restart this? I'm sorry. Alright, is everybody ready? Alright, then we shall begin now. Why didn't the Cold War spiral into an atomic war?
Why didn't so the Cold War is one example.
Just please tell me why. Why didn't
Because-
the Cold War turn into an atomic war?
Partly it was because of mutually assured destruction, although I will say that that's not the complete response.
So didn't
it's
you,
also
didn't
because
in
of
your
diplomacy
opponent's
used
rebuttal speech?
during. Will you let
your
me finish,
opponent-
please?
No. Your opponent your partner states that MAD is maybe not real, correct?
No, I do not think she used those exact words.
All right. But at the end of your partner's speech, she said that we talked about the Marshall Plan. In what instance did we talk about the Marshall Plan? And your partner also said that soft power is unlikely to fail, yet you have provided no evidence against one of our pieces of evidence saying that soft power diplomacy fails 32% of the time.
Even if soft power fails, countries are more prepared to face the consequences due to stronger relations. Did you even listen to the second half of the card?
So majority of the time, diplomacy fails. So countries are going to have to
No,
prepare.
we never said that the majority of the time diplomacy
I
fails.
said that. I said
okay,
that.
Fine, you said that, but
So the countries are going to have to take up the effects. They're going to have to prepare for the failure of diplomacy every time.
no, because being prepared is always a better thing. I don't. What is your question?
I'm just gonna move on. So what is the longest time that positive peace has been reinforced?
Could you please elaborate on that?
Like, what is the longest period of time that positive peace has been enforced?
70 years
70 when?
from the end of World War II to now,
All right.
and from the
But
Egyptian
wasn't that when the
peace
Cold War happened?
treaty. And from the Egyptian peace treaty, and from 2 minutes. Everybody ready? Judges ready? Partner ready? Opponents ready? Yeah. 2 minutes. Time start now. Our opponents state that military power can produce and carry peace. But is this positive or negative peace? Our opponents say that this doesn't matter, but in reality it does, because positive peace is the type of peace that better maintains the peace. And isn't this what the resolution is all about? Maintaining peace? And we have proven in our case that positive peace is the way to go. So our opponents have not stated how their case promotes positive peace. Furthermore, they also state that the Versailles Treaty was an example of failed diplomacy. But the Versailles Treaty worked in the terms that it did what it was supposed to do. Diplomacy worked. An example of how this was actually an example of how it did work. Turned it against them. response should have been continued negotiations rather than war. The actual issue, was when Germany came to rely on military power rather than continued diplomacy. They also say that a soft power worsens the effects, but again, countries are, even if soft power fails, and we're not saying that it fails for the majority of the time, we're saying because nothing is 100% perfect. So even if it fails, countries are more prepared to face the consequences due to stronger relations formed by the positive peace we create through diplomacy. So, soft power has been successful many more times than it has failed. The Marshall Plan, the opening to China, the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty are all examples which our opponents have asked for, and now we have provided. The Marshall Plan, to go into more details, was a demonstration of U.S. goodwill to former adversaries like Germany and Italy. The opening to China was by Richard Nixon and started communication between China after nearly a quarter century of non-communication. It increased external pressure from the Soviet Union, facilitated the U.S. exit from the Vietnam conflict, and laid the foundation for the Chinese-American cooperation. So really, all these examples of diplomacy working are much more impactful than just one example failing. For all these reasons, we urge a pro ballot. Thank you.
We will be taking some practice.
Finally, my judge is ready. All right, then we shall begin. So, starting off my defense case, I would like to address what my opponent said, refuting our first contention. Now, she said that soft power is much more effective, and yet I stated in my first and second contention that the detriments of the effects of soft power when it fails, and how much it fails, 32%. And if it fails, if it succeeds 32% of the time and fails 68% of the time, obviously it's a greater risk to go with diplomacy. And now, moving on to our attack that they made against our second contention, that assured destruction is not sustainable because of non-state actors. Let's rewind. You can't use diplomacy against terrorists, or even groups such as dictatorships like North Korea. You can't coerce them out of doing what they are doing. That's why military power is the best action. We can get rid of certain, like ISIS's oil supply. We can target that so they have less money to purchase all of these guns or all this support, and they're just going to get weaker so the United States and other superpowers can attack that terrorist group. Now, moving on. Our opponents never successfully refuted our 32% evidence at all. They also never proved that you don't rely on the other person. Because obviously you do. The other country, the other person, is just walk away knowing that they're going to get to your head. And now, addressing their point about the Treaty of Versailles, what else was Germany going to do? They were forced into the corner by diplomacy. They had no help, because they started World War I, and all the countries hated them. So what were they going to do? Diplomacy made them build up their army. Diplomacy made them fight back into World War II. Now, Judge, I'd like to end my defense speech with this. What is more impactful? All of these small wars that's been happening after World War II, or 60 million people dying in World War II? So for that reason, Judge, I urge a con ballot. Thank you.
Judge ready? Opposition ready?
Yeah.
Yes, you were.
Yes.
And partner ready? My time will begin now. So first I would like to address the 32% statistic that the opposition has used. Our opponents have actually provided no context for the statistic, and it's also American specific. I just wanted to get that out of the way. And now we will address the main points of clash in this debate, which were positive peace and how peace is better maintained. We win on both of these points because in a pro-world, we solve for the root causes and structural violence in issues, creating positive peace. The use of preventative diplomacy prevents many casualties caused by military power and reduces the probability that future conflict will occur. Even if it does, we are more prepared to face the conflict, ensuring the best decisions made for a better world for future generations. In a con world, they harbor negative peace, escalating tensions and eventually causing even more conflict. Diplomacy may not have prevented one large war, but the smaller wars and casualties add up. The opposition has still not proved how they create positive peace, so they do not win this debate. Since the affirmative saves 180,000 people, even more than that, which are lives lost caused by armed conflicts, prevents more than 56,000 fatalities, and saves the economy and people and creates a better quality of life with a better world, with less racism, less discrimination, and less sexism and structural issues that we solve for, you should vote pro in this debate. Thank you.
I will be taking the rest of my prep, starting. Okay, I'm ready. Partner ready?
Yep.
Opponents ready?
Yep.
Judges ready? So here's what it all comes down to. We're at the end of the debate, and we have two different frameworks. One that wants to completely funnel it into one specific thing, and one where we're looking at the more broader term. The pro is saying we should maintain positive peace, and this is how it's going to work. And we're talking about maintaining peace in general. Now, we proved that with our MAD card, which shows that we've maintained peace through just mutually assured destruction from the end of World War I up until now. That's not soft, happy peace. That's just peace that's kept us from engaging in a nuclear conflict and wiping out the rest of humanity. So that still stands. Moving on, they disproved our evidence just by dismissing it. I did not ever hear another statistic to go up against our claim that, yes, diplomacy does fail 68% of the time, and there was no examples that they gave us that military fails, and we showed that when diplomacy fails, the military consequences are even worse. So that also turns in our favor. Now, moving on, we are answering our framework because it's the ones that relates most to the resolution. We are maintaining peace for the longest time because negative peace actually still works, and it actually keeps us out of a nuclear war, which is better than what positive peace has done in the past, as we showed with our Iraq card. Now, moving on, they were talking about saving a couple 100,000 lives. Well, we're talking about a failure of diplomacy that resulted in one of the biggest wars in all of humanity. And the end of their final focus was completely idealistic. That's what the pro is. It's an idealistic, naive world where you can just talk things out and expect everyone to be able to come to a compromise. But that's not how it works. We have terrorist groups, we have non-state actors, we have dictatorships and tyrannies. And they provided no evidence on how they're going to end sexism and racism in the world. And that's just a claim that's been thrown out there, like all throughout this debate, that this is just an idealistic approach to solving world peace where we have concrete evidence showing that, yes, we would love to do diplomacy if it works. 68% of the time it doesn't work, and we've shown that when it doesn't work, the consequences are even more catastrophic, and that's why you should be voting con today. Thank you.